So I've had to pretty much reconvince myself that I'm not an idiot for sticking with what I want to stick through, right? Even though it makes me really happy, I like doing what I do. At some point, you got to be brutally honest with yourself and weigh out the pros and cons of is what I'm doing, like, do I love it enough for the doubt to set in and have to go through that um, valley of despair? So that's something that you have to think about like pretty frequently when you're first starting, because when you're first starting, every day is an uphill battle in your business. I'm not going to sit here and say that your life is just going to suck, because it's just money at the end of the day. But when you first start something, and this is what I keep getting reminded of, is you are like just going to hit a wall. You're just going to keep hitting that wall, and nothing is going to stick. You're going to lose all your money, blah, blah, blah. You know what I'm talking about if you've tried to do anything of value. But you have to ask yourself, why am I sticking with this, and what's my why, right? And you start to lose your natural charisma and your natural like light behind your eyes for life and your business when you realize that so it might not work out. And you have to remind yourself that, and somebody smart said this, it was the real utility of thought is knowing what thoughts you shouldn't listen to, right? I've talked about this a lot, and it's really true, because I think your mind is a reflection of your business. Because once you fix your mind, you can make money pretty easily. It's very easy to make money when you have that tunnel vision, and your mind isn't filled with anything else. That's like the biggest gift that you can get to. That's where you want to get through. And you go through life and you pick these things, like you're pretty much at like a store when you're born, right? You find the things that you like. So like when you're 4, you like baseball, or like when you're 4, you like basketball, whatever the fuck you like. I don't know. Maybe you like Barbie dolls, but you go through life and you pick these things that seem really interesting. And it's the same exact thing with online business. And then you see somebody else and they're doing something that sparks that reaction to life, and you kind of want to take it, or you want to try it. So you have this initial thing that you really like, and then you get shiny object syndrome, and you choose something else. Intrinsically, you know that jumping ship is probably not the right choice, which is where the internal lying starts and the decline of your natural charisma. And at some point, if you're watching this video, you're down this rabbit hole of self-improvement in business and all that stuff. But at some point, you have to tell that voice in your head to just shut the fuck up. And I always thought that when somebody told me that you don't know what you're getting yourself into, like somebody that's been trading for a while, like one of my good friends, Joe was trading for about a year before he taught me how to trade. And he would always be like, bro, you don't know what you're getting yourself into. I remember he would post these like Snapchat stories and people would be like, oh, dude, he's losing his mind. But when somebody said like, you don't know what you're getting yourself into, and this skill will break you to the ground before it gives you anything. I always thought, and it's not just Joe, it's a bunch of people. I always thought that those people were just trying to hold some sort of moral high ground, right? Or gatekeeping the skill. I was like, oh, I'm going to try trading. I'm going to make a ton of money. It's just going to be evergreen. It wasn't until people started asking me, and I realized that trading is one of those things that fundamentally you can learn really fast. But once you get into the nitty gritty of it, it's all a mental game. And it wasn't until people started asking me, oh, should I get into trading? And I would be like, no. And they'd be confused. I remember another friend that I had, his name's Jake. He texted me about a year and a half ago, and he was like, dude, I'm going to get into trading. And I remember I sent him a voice memo on Snapchat. I was like, dude, you don't like, and I wasn't trying to gatekeep. I was genuinely like, he was interested in trading. I'm like, okay. I'm like, dude, you have to be like mentally insane to get into this skill. Like it's very, very like hard mentally. And I remember he responded with like, what does it even mean? Like you like, that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. So he tried trading for 6 months, and then we revisited that thought, and he was like, yeah, this is like the hardest thing I've ever done. And then I don't think he trades anymore. But that goes to show you that, and that was a really like conviction for me, is like, oh, I revisited that feeling. And that's all life is. You just keep revisiting these feelings. So once you get to a point where you're so dulled down by just constant losing and losing and losing, that you no longer become reactive to life, and instead you have in your mind that idea of losing is just obsolete. It doesn't exist. It's an emotion that you can detach from, and that is where the conviction to where you want to go happens. And you get to this point where there's no longer a divergence in happiness and sadness, because that emotion doesn't exist. And some people sadly never come to this realization of that when you remove your emotions, you're only left with the burden of performance and consistency. And I don't mean like completely detach and be emotionless in life, but also don't base your life around these like pockets of emotion. So it's like, when I get here, I'll be happy, or like when I get there, I'll be happy. Meaning like, you shouldn't come into trading with the mindset of, oh, I'm going to hit these revenue checkpoints, or your business, I'm going to hit these revenue checkpoints and life's going to be great, because that's not realistic. You'll never win that way, because when you get too high or too low, everything crashes. So what I'm trying to say is disassociate your thoughts, and especially the thoughts that you know you shouldn't be listening to. And this all kind of ties back into when you're feeling lost, you're probably not actually lost. You're probably just not making the right choice. And I've talked about this in, like I said, newsletters or even on my Instagram. But I'm going to tell you a story about the first time that I felt like I trusted myself, and it kind of shot me in the face. So, all right, this is the time where I didn't associate my success with caring about what other people thought. And this goes back almost 3 years ago. Well, it was 3 years ago. But so there was a time when I dropped out of college and I had to go to Christmas. And then I got the question of, oh, how's college? You know what I'm talking about. How's college and what are you studying? Blah, blah, blah. And for context, I dropped out of college and I made my first bit of money in college, like my first bit of real money. And I felt like the fucking man, right? Long story short, people were asking what I was doing with college, and I told them I was dropping out. And I didn't care at all when they gave me a rebuttal or like a conflict of interest, because I had this just euphoric feeling of I'm the man and nobody can tell me shit because I just made all this money. And also, I'm going to keep quoting people. I don't know who said this, but you start off, when you start anything, you start off super optimistic, and then you have a bunch of momentum, right? And then you realize that the thing that you want to do is going to be harder than you thought it was going to be at the start. And that's this valley of despair that I keep talking about. You get to this valley of despair, and that's where most people spend their entire lives, because it's really hard to break out of that valley of despair. It's really hard to like just push through. So when you get to the momentum part of it, which is where I was at, I had momentum. I was making money, made the first like big decision in my life where I was like, okay, I'm going to drop out. Fast forward a couple months, I got to this point where I became overconfident and I blew all the money that I had. I completely disregarded my skills, and I just let emotion take over, which made for a consequence. And it was really the first time in my life where I felt like I let other people down, because I tried to step out of the box and it didn't work, right? And it's a form of guilt that was brand new to me, and it makes you feel vulnerable. And a lot of people have this moment, whether it's early, for me it was earlier in my life, but some people have this when they're 30, when they try to start something new. So what happens when you're naturally vulnerable is you start to think, oh, maybe those people were right? And when you don't have a feeling, or when that's the first time you've ever had that feeling, maybe it's not as extreme, and maybe it's just a similar feeling. Maybe it's not that exact thing where you start a business and kind of blows up in your face. But the only way you get conviction to the thing that you want to do is you have to be okay with the choice that you made, and ignoring, like I said, goes back to ignoring that thoughts that you shouldn't be listening to. And when you don't use the business model as a scapegoat, because I see a lot of people do this. A lot of people will start and then they'll fail, like we said, 2 weeks in, and they'll use that vehicle that they use to try to make money as a scapegoat, and they don't trust themselves. And when that happens, it's really hard to make decisions when you don't trust yourself. So I'm gonna wrap this up here, but there's a very pristine man by the name of Young Thug, and he says, why not risk life when it's going to keep going? So if you are dealing with specifically trading, because I've had this feeling, and every trader said this feeling for years, like, yeah, I'm a profitable trader now, but like I still have this thought of, what am I getting myself into, and can I continue? Is it going to crash and burn again? But he says, why not risk life when it's going to keep going? And that's true. Why not risk what you have and just figure it out from there?